Topic 3. Let's talk about something completely non-gaming related. Tell me about yourself. And you landed on like just kind of the. You messaged me and were like, and I'll just talk about comedy. And I was like, okay, that's a vague. Comedy is a vague term. So let's talk comedy. Where do you see this conversation going?
Well, I thought mostly it would probably lean into like stand up probably. But
Okay.
I didn't want to just limit it to that because I also because when you think about like when I tried to think about like all right, well what other interests do I have besides gaming? And gaming does take up so much of my life. But I was like my other main interest throughout my life was comedy, and that's like TV, movies, and like it's mostly stand up.
Mm-hmm.
And so I figure the conversation will probably be more in the stand-up realm, but I didn't want to like rule out any TV shows or movies or anything.
All right. Sounds great.
Yeah.
So let's talk comedy. Stand up wise, who are some of your favorites there?
So one of my all-time favorites is Aziz Ansari, and
Solid.
his first special, I think it's called Intimate Moments for a Sensual Evening, and that was his first like TV stand-up special, and it's fucking amazing. And like I DVR'd it when it was on Comedy Central, and I watched it. Then I downloaded it to my old iPod because I used to, before I listened to podcasts, I would just listen to like hours of stand-up a week.
Yeah, I
And
I did have done similar things back when it was iPods
yeah,
and not like just you can put everything on your phone.
and I just remember like I would listen, and I remember the listening to it on iPod for the first time because it's different than the like TV version because it's uncensored, it's also longer and has different even jokes that are completely cut out.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just so good. And then, like part of the reason I think it's so good is because it's hilarious, but I've listened to it and watched it collectively like 10 times probably, and I know it word for word, and I still laugh at parts of it, and it
Nice.
still like makes me laugh to think about. So that's why I always say like, yeah, that is probably one of my all-time favorite specials.
Um, Real quick, since you grew up out here, do you remember there was like a morning show? I don't remember which it was, but it was like a radio morning show, and like every week they would do like a character battle. Do you remember this at all?
I
Is
don't.
this ringing any bells? Damn, because that was another thing I would have on my iPod was I would like download all of their battles, and it was like I mean like it would be they would come up with a character and they would come up with two characters, and whichever one and it would be like 5 minutes of each one. It would just be random shit. One of the ones that ended up being like the longest running character was called Jerry the Dog with Inner Monologue, and it would just be like this dog character just talking to himself, and like he would have catchphrases like pretty much every episode would end with him being like, "Oh hey, my nuts, and I can reach them with my mouth," and he would just like do that, and then but like he would have a challenger every week, and it would be just random things like I mean, one of the other like big champions was like Tony Montana, Walgreens pharmacist or something like that. And so it was taking like characters that you kind of knew and then like putting them in a weird setting or just coming up with that. But it was like just this, it was like a hallmark thing of like one of the radio shows in town. And yeah, I would listen to those segments for hours and hours and hours on my old iPod, old Gen 1 iPod,
Mm.
because I'm an old piece of crap. So sorry. So I was like, oh, I wonder if like that was a comedy thing of your past, but no, sadly,
I know
sounds like not.
when it came to radio for me, it was basically like I never listened to the radio, so it was what my parents would listen to. And their whole thing was just like basically like 95% of the time it was just John Jay and Rich,
Mm-hmm.
which like I think only the two of us and like Cameron will understand because we're
Yeah.
from Arizona. But yeah, that's pretty much all I remember. And I remember them listening to other radio stations, but I honestly have no idea. Like I don't remember who the people were on there, like what bits they did.
Yeah. Actually, I think John Jay and Rich are a bigger thing now, at least. Like they're based out of Tucson, but like they're part of like the one of the bigger networks. So I think they have like a syndicated show kind of around parts of the country at least. So they're not just a Phoenix thing, but they're like largely in Arizona. They're based out of Arizona, but other people might know John Jay and Rich. I don't know. I like almost never listen to them. This was like, yeah, I don't even remember who I listened to, but anyway, the topic isn't morning shows; it's comedy. So Aziz Ansari, yeah, I mean, some of his stuff's great on like the Comedy Central stuff and now the Netflix stuff. I love. I mean, I loved everything he did, like with like Parks and Rec. It's one of my favorite shows, and him being on it helps that easily. So what else? Who else you got?
So another one of like I just wanted to kind of bring up his special. So a lot of people know him now, Louis C.K.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
He's obviously insanely popular, and his first special that was $5. I forget what it's called. I think it's called like stand up comedian, or like it might be called hilarious or something.
Mm-hmm.
But it's the first one he released for $5 that you could buy.
Right.
It's also fucking amazing. Like that was the one where, because what I used to do with stand up all the time too is I would watch all this stand up and then I would just kind of like not repeat the jokes, but I would like reenact the jokes for people, mostly my sister. And that was the one where I would literally watch, like once he finished a bit, I would be laughing and then I would pause it and then I would go reenact it for her and then she would laugh and then I would go back and watch it. And then I would get to the part where I'm like, oh my God, this is fucking hilarious. And then I would go pause it and then like walk away. Like it's just so fucking good.
Mm-hmm.
He has this the one joke about, it's not gonna be funny anymore because I can't do it word for word, but like he has the joke about he rented a car and he left it at the airport and he didn't bring it back to them, and then he called them while he was on the airplane and was like, and when they were like, oh, but yeah, you can't just leave the rent a car and we can come get it, like you have to bring it to us. And he was like, well, he's like, I left it at the airport, I'm on the plane right now, the keys are in it. And he's just kind of like going over their like interaction he had, and it's just like it's so fucking funny.
Yeah. Do you so outside of the stand up sect, like do you watch like Louis's show? Do you watch Louis?
I watched it a few times. Like I've seen like probably like half the episodes, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And then some of them get like really weird and really dark, and then some of them are also like fucking hilarious. Like the one where his car gets like destroyed or whatever because he's in the no parking zone, but he can't understand what the sign says.
Yeah. That's his. I love his brand of humor because I'm a fan of his stand up stuff as well. And then like the fact that like FX, I think it's FX, has just kind of given him like, okay, we're gonna give you so much a season and just stay under budget, but you can do whatever you want, and he does. Like that. I don't think there's a show out there on TV that is like more one person singular vision than Louis is, and now we're getting more stuff like that. Like with Master of None by Aziz Ansari is the same kind of thing where like Netflix gave him money and he just kind of got to make the show that he wanted to make, as long as it stayed under budget. And so he like brought in his parents to like be on his show, which is awesome. I mean, they're like horrible actors, but it's still endearing that it's him getting to have these conversations that he's kind of done in bits and stuff, but now you're getting to see them with the actual people. So yeah, I can totally appreciate that. Have you ever done stand up before we kind of dive into more?
I have, yeah. Because as people might know, I haven't really done a ton during this, but I make a lot of jokes.
Some of them might even be considered irrelevant.
I mean, most of them are.
That's fair.
And so I basically was like, I wanted to be a stand-up like comedian.
Okay.
And then I wanted to do that and be a writer. So on top of all the writing I used to do, where I just have like notebooks filled with like scripts and screenplays and stuff that I've written, I also have like a notebook just full of like stand-up bits that I wrote that I think most of are probably awful. But so in high school, it came to that time where like everybody was always telling me like, oh, you need to do like stand-up. You're really funny. So eventually I was like, talent show. I was like, here we go. Stand up. And I was like, what could go wrong?
So what went wrong?
I mean, the first time I didn't like bomb at all. But the first time I basically put a lot of work into it and I kept rewriting jokes and I kept testing them out on like a million different people. And so eventually I go out there and I don't remember exactly what my opener was, but it basically like did not land whatsoever. And like no one thought it was funny. And I was like, fuck, I have like 5 more minutes left. So I basically threw out all the stuff I pre-wrote, and I just started like making fun. I basically did the kind of like the Anthony Jeselnik type thing, where I just started making fun of the people who went to school there, and like I was just like killing. And I'm basically on stage right now, and I'm making fun of like teachers, the principal, and I'm like these kids that go to school, like this guy that plays football, and I'm like, and it's like all stuff that all these people relate to and like think of, and I'm like, yes, I did it. I'm like, at least I can think on my feet.
Yeah.
And then
it's one of those things that like you can't. It doesn't really translate to a different audience at all.
Yeah, exactly. That's what made me worry too. Is I'm like, I could not do those jokes outside of that like auditorium.
Yeah.
And I'm like, and then the second time I did it, it went like 1,000 times better. But I basically just did the same thing over again. And I had like a couple pre-written jokes I worked in. Like my one opener at one point, I forget if it was the one that didn't land, but I was basically like, oh hey, and I was like, are you guys all ready to see some like puppetry? And people are like, yeah, and I'm like, oh shit, and I'm like, I don't do puppets. I'm like, I didn't think that would be the response that was gonna get, and I was like, ah. And then I would just like go, and then I would just move on, and then go into like other jokes. And then the joke I think that did the best was that the thing going on at our school at the time was that a girl was getting like text messages from a dude that was like, and they were really creepy, and like some of them were really sexual, and like I don't remember them, but basically she like screen capped them and like printed them out, and so like everyone at the school had seen all these text messages from this dude, and she like wasn't responding. It was just like his side. And it was just like, and so she got up to like go to the bathroom or something, and I was like, oh, what's wrong? Where are you going? I was like, you didn't get my text messages? Fucking destroyed, like brought down the house.
Nice. But know your audience. That's a key to comedy. Yeah, I did stand up a little bit in college. We had a talent show too, kind of thing, like a once a month. We called it Tiny Tina's, and it was basically just like in the theater department. We had like an open mic night. You could do comedy. You could do like some people did sketches, some people did music, and so yeah, I ended up building. I specifically remember doing like 2 sets. I did one set that was talking about my history working at Sam's Club, and like talking about the different things I did at Sam's Club when I worked there, because I worked there for like 3 years. It was like my high school into college job, and like doing bits about like I'm not the kind of person you expect when you think of like Sam's Club greeter. But I had to work the door and cover the door, and so like people would walk in, and I would confuse them with my youngness and my spryness. So that was like one of my segments, and then the other was I did a whole bit basically on a cross country road trip I did with my dad, where we went. We drove from here to my grandmother's house in Michigan. And I basically did like a bit on like each state that we went through, and also just talked about the fact that my dad listens to 2 things on the radio: dance music, at like house music, and Rush Limbaugh, like talk radio and dance music. And that's a really weird combination for a 30-hour drive across the country. So yeah, like those are the 2. Like, I mean, both of them did fine. Like I got laughs and people had a good time, but it was definitely like I did the same kind of thing as you, where like I put a lot of time into those bits, and I probably would not have like managed as well had they like bombed right out the gate. So I was just like, well, I hope these go over well, because I've basically got this set memorized, and so we're just gonna do this and hope it's good.
The joke I always wanted to work, but like I never actually told it on stage, but I basically wrote out a whole bit once about how like why is Slippy Toad a part of the Star Fox team? And it basically was like his he was like, oh, and like how like, oh, like Fox wears like this cool leather jacket, and what does Slippy Toad wear? He was like, he wears the janitor's outfit. And I was like, the Slippy Toad's definitely like the janitor's son of that ship. And then they're like, yeah, we'll do you this favor, like he can be part of the, like he can come to the school that like Fox trains at. And I'm like, and he's always like, oh, I need help. And that was basically like, it's a lot longer, but it's basically just about that. Mm-hmm. And I was always like I know, I think this is funny, and I hope this works. And I'm like, but I don't have the audience to do this for. And I'm like, because my high school is not the audience to like do the Slippy Toad bit about.
Yeah, so it's the kind of thing that like like Mike Drucker can go out and pull off at a Kind of Funny Live too kind of thing. But yeah, you definitely need kind of a very target crowd for video game humor, very niche video game humor. I would appreciate it. Yeah. So outside of like stand up, did you do any other, like you mentioned you'd written scripts and stuff? Is that just kind of like things you had in like the back of your head that you wanted to work on at some point?
Yeah, basically, like I used to be way more of a writer than I am now, and I used to write for like forever, like pretty much every day. Like I would just because I just would get like ideas like every day, and I was just like, I don't know, I'm just gonna write this down, work on this. And then now it's like it's so weird to me now because like I used to be that way. Now I'm just like I don't. And then sometimes I think of the ideas, I just don't write them down. Mm. And but yeah, like so it's just notebooks full of like movies, TV, comic books, jokes, like whatever. And it's just like I have like a whole box just full of notebooks, just handwritten with all this like stuff in them that I'm just like I don't know. I wish one day I could do something with some of this.
Yeah, same. I was just telling some friends about this. I was telling some people in the Facebook admin Kind of Funny group chat that we have, that I gave somebody a setup and then they hit the punchline that I was aiming for, and everybody got a good laugh out of the conversation. And I was like, yeah, I miss writing sketch comedy sometimes, because I did that for a year and a half at ASU with their sketch comedy troupe, and that was a ton of fun. Just kind of doing like the SNL grind, like a weekly show, writing sketches, rehearsing them, doing like a weekly news weekend update kind of thing, and putting it all together. Like have a first read on Monday, and by Friday we're performing an hour-long show. It was a ton of fun, very stressful, but like very rewarding when like the audience is cracking up at something you wrote being performed by very funny people. So there are definitely times where I'm like, oh, it'd be fun to do that. And I've done the same kind of stuff where like I had like spec scripts for like a TV show pilot kind of idea, which I got very annoyed because, again, going like to my background at Sam's Club and then Costco later, I was like, I want to do like an office style show around the people that push the carts, called Cart Crew. And it's basically like you've got like the main protagonist who's probably like a JD from Scrubs type of character, who just has he's there. He's like it's a job. This isn't like his future. Then you have like the guy who it is his life. Like he's never gonna be something else. Then you have like the girl who, because it was a thing at one of the places I worked at, like they were like, no, girls can't push carts because it's too dangerous of a job. And so the girl character was like, she fought like a lawsuit kind of thing to get the job to push carts. And then you had like the old senile / very wise door greeter that would like give the main character like advice every week and stuff. And so it was like I had like a whole 22 episode like season arc like written out for this show. And then I find out like a year ago or something that they made a show called Superstore. I think it's like on Hulu or something. I'm like, that's my fucking show. You made my show. Fuck you, Superstore. I've never watched it though, so it's probably a completely different track. But like I saw an ad for it recently that was like, it's like the successor to The Office, Superstore, and I was like, fuck you.
I once had a whole show out written once that was it was basically about dudes that live in a house, and you know that completely original concept for a show.
Yeah.
And it was basically just about these like 5 roommates and just like all the weird shit that would happen. And there was specifically an episode I think about where like they get into argument about doing chores, and it's not as sitcom as it sounds. Basically, I would relate it closer to like the Silicon Valley type show than like The Big Bang Theory. So they get in an argument about doing chores. So they like, all right, well, you're not going to take out the trash. I'm like, I'm not going to do the dishes, and like getting into an argument. And they're having this whole thing. So like by the end of the episode, there's like trash bags like stacked up to the ceiling. And like the one roommate's like the dishes that are like the kitchen's like overflowing dishes, and the dude's like eating cereal like with a spatula off of like a plate. And it was basically just like there was way more that happened in that episode. I just specifically remember that imagery. And I remember there was another episode where like they have it was like basically the punchline kind of thing at the end of the season was that you find out that the fifth or sixth roommate or whatever that's not ever seen that they live with, and they're like, man, that guy goes to work so early, like we never see his car in the driveway, or like, and he gets home after all of us, blah blah, and it's like he moved out like a month ago or like 6 months ago, like he doesn't live there anymore, and like these dudes that have been like have these bunk beds or whatever because they don't, it's like basically like a 3-bedroom house but there's like 6 of them. And there was these dudes that sleep in bunk beds together, and it's basically like they had the whole like king size or like master bedroom that's just empty because he moved out like months ago.
Nice, I like it. When we all become like weird, crazy content creators in a commune, we'll have like a whole network of TV shows or web shows or something that we'll all sit around and write and shoot shit like this. Have a grand old time. All right, so we've touched on some of those aspects of comedy. So who else out there is like comedy idols for you?
I don't know necessarily about like idols, but I'm trying to think of who else comes to mind because there is tons of stand-up. Oh, another one of my favorite jokes that made me like die laughing is you know Eugene Merman?
Yeah.
From probably most notably from the one voice from Bob's Burgers.
Yeah.
And so I started his watching stand up like forever ago, and I've been following him, and he has a lot of really funny bits about like, and they're all really kind of like similar to probably my humor of like just things that are completely irrelevant, but like he'll just talk about them anyways. And he has stand up jokes where like he fucks with people. He had a whole thing about some guy, he made friends with a guy on MySpace who was like, oh, if you ever need, or like, hey, like come listen to my band and like buy my CD and like, oh, blah blah blah, place to stay. And so he's like, yeah. So I sent him a message, and I was like, hey, if you ever need a place to stay in New York, me too. Yeah, like it's just really funny. He has all these jokes of him like fucking with people. But his main joke that was, I forget what the special's called, but he has this really funny joke about Facebook ads and how anyone can put ads on Facebook and target them whoever they want.
Yeah. Oh yes, yes. Absolutely, yeah. I listen to like I have Sirius Radio, and so I would listen to like the comedy channel every now and then, and like that bit was one that would like routinely pop up, and yeah, it's a very funny segment, definitely.
Yeah, it's so funny because it's just about how like he targeted this Facebook ad that was like a high school photo of him, and it said like, you touched me inappropriately, like give me $20 or I'll tell. And he targeted it like men who like Beverly Hills Cop aged 50 to like 65. And like see, like I can't even finish it now because like I'm laughing, and it's just like, and I remember the first time I saw it, I died laughing. And the same thing with like kind of like listening to the audio of it later on, like because it's on like Spotify or something. I listened to it later and I died laughing again, and I'm like, this is so fucking funny. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm just like, I love it.
Do you have you ever heard of John Mulaney?
Yeah, I have.
Seen any of his stuff? One of his that like I die every time I think about it, and I want to do it somewhere. Is he's got a
box one?
Huh? Yeah, the jukebox one. Yeah, doing What's New Pussycat over and over and over again, like playing that times. And then switching it up to It's Not Unusual the one time, and then it goes back to What's New Pussycat, and somebody loses their goddamn mind. Like I heard that was the first thing I'd ever heard of his. Again, just like randomly on Sirius or something. And I was like this is a priceless and incredibly well crafted story. I need to know more about this guy, and so I like sought him out and found out more of stuff. And then like I find out that he's the guy that like wrote all of Stefan bits on SNL with Bill Hader, and I was like, oh, that's like he's. And then unfortunately he got a show, and it was just not a great show. Like he was trying too hard to be like Seinfeld in a time well past the peak of Seinfeld era.
Have you heard his Law and Order joke?
Oh yeah. With Ice-T.
Yeah, it's basically about all the like stereotypes of like Law and Order characters, and how like the guy who can't stop moving boxes even though he's being questioned about a murder. Mm-hmm. And like the bartender, the New York bartender that remembers every person that comes into the bar.
Yeah.
And he's so basically one of the main ways I used to watch comedy was Comedy Central. Basically, like how we talked about how Game Informer was the only way to get game news. And So I've probably seen like 70 to 80% of all the Comedy Central presents ever filmed.
Yeah,
And they're,
I mean,
they're
for a
still
long
doing
time I was the same way.
they're still doing them, so I'm kind of like out of the loop on that. And a lot of the people I talk about are really famous now, but they weren't like 5 years ago when I used to listen to
Mhm.
them. So I'm really out of the loop. Like I don't even know what like underground like people are about to blow up. But like I remember telling people about Hannibal Buress in like 2013 or even like
Mhm.
2014, and then he like now he's like who he is, and like everyone loves him. And I'm like, yeah, see, I just do the thing with comedy where I'm like, good for you. Like I liked you, and like you made it.
Yeah.
So I'm like, you deserve it. But yeah, like Hannibal Buress is another really funny dude. But to go back to the Comedy Central Presents is basically like some of those like John Mulaney's is like fucking amazing, and that's where he does the It's Not Unusual bit and the Law and Order bit. I also really loved Bo Burnham's is really funny too,
Yeah, Bo Burnham's great.
and Nick Thunes was also has one of my favorite Comedy Central Presents, and Eugene Merman has a good one too. Like basically anyone like we've talked about usually has one, and but some of them I think are really really good.
Hmm.
And let's see who I was a big TJ Miller fan.
Okay.
And basically like when I was like from between like 2008 2009 whatever till like 2013 2014 when I was really listening to lots and lots of stand up, this like Chicago comedy scene was kind of like blowing up. And that's where like, well, Eugene Merman was in New York at a time, but that's where like Hannibal Buress, TJ Miller, Kumail Nanjiani, even kind of like the other guy from Silicon Valley, I don't remember, and then like Kurt Braunohler, and just kind of like a bunch of other people all came out of the same like comedy scene.
Hmm.
And those were all the people that I used to like watch, and now they're pretty like they're doing successfully. So I'm like, oh, good for you. I'm like, I'm
Yeah.
proud of you.
Yeah. I mean, that was always fun. Yeah. When you'd see like somebody that you remember their 30-minute stand up on that, or I mean, like even, I mean, it is like going further back, but like, it like pulp comics or whatever on Comedy Central, where it was like, they would do like 3 or 4 5-minute segments and they would like act it out, and like create a kind of a visual storytelling to the gag as well. Like I like, yeah, I loved those, and then I loved seeing that person like kind of become more and more prominent on the scene, with a few exceptions, like Carlos Mencia. Like I remember really enjoying him like when I first saw him, and then he got a show and everything, and then like you find out that like he's like notorious for like joke stealing and stuff. It's like, well, that sucks, because now I feel bad for having liked him. Oh well.
Yeah.
Like I didn't know better. I didn't know he was ripping off people's jokes and stuff. I mean, like Dane Cook was another one where it was like I remember like Dane Cook and Mitch Hedberg. I remember like having their CDs and like listening to their CDs like nonstop, and like being able to go through all their jokes kind of by memory. And then uh, Mitch Hedberg, I remember there was a very specific, like he did a show here in Phoenix where he was basically passed out the entire night. It was like him and Stephen Lynch, who's another one that I loved, his like musical stuff. But like Mitch Hedberg was so far gone that he basically passed out on stage during his set. And like the audience was pissed and like demanded their money back. And then like a few months later, he was gone. He OD'd. And so it was like, oh, like it sucks that he got like so destroyed by his own demons. Because like he was great at like the anytime you're like, oh yeah, I do comedy, people are like, oh, tell me a joke, and it's like, well, I mean, so much comedy is like telling a story that's funny, and not like just one liners. But he was great with one liners, and so it was like sad to see him go. But I also am super glad I didn't end up seeing that comedy show where he was just passed out on stage, because I would have been really disappointed. It was bad enough just hearing about it like secondhand from friends in college. And then like just randomly, there's like a Justin Bieber concert here a few months back where it sounded like Bieber was doing the same thing. He was like very low energy and like basically like fell asleep on stage or something. And I was like, is it horrible to kind of hope that he did it the same way as Mitch Hedberg? Yeah, it's absolutely horrible, but it doesn't mean it didn't happen. So yeah. Any others? Any other like standout notable comedians that.
Mitch Hedberg was definitely another one I was going to give a shout out to, and like he has like kind of like what you were saying with the one-liners is like I can think of like 5 different Mitch Hedberg jokes that you can just tell, and kind of like what I'm telling you, like oh Louis C.K. has like a story about this, and like it's not as funny because I'm telling you like oh this is a story, it's about this. Like Mitch Hedberg has like the joke where he's like oh, and he's like I went to the store to get a candle holder, they were out, and he's like so I bought a cake.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it's just like like he was fucking great.
And he's one of the ones that's like most quoted just when I'm like out and about, like at like PAX West. I heard people like whenever the escalators were down or whatever, like I would just hear people being like, not temporarily out of order, temporarily stairs.
Yeah,
and I'd be like, yep, rest in peace, Mitch Hedberg. And like needing receipt for a donut. I will order something and I'll be like, I can't imagine ever needing a time where I need to prove this transaction happened. So no, I'm good.
And so then he another one another one I want to give a shout out to is Dimitri Martin, because for a long time he was definitely a favorite, and I still think his one show that he did the first season of his Comedy Central show I think is fucking amazing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I love the ones that like Comedy Central gave a chance to do something with, and I like some like that was great. I loved his show as well, and it was sad that like it didn't get more traction and he didn't get to do more with it. But yeah, it makes sense too because he's very like niche-ish, appeals to a very certain kind of comedy that I think other people probably do a little bit better.
Yeah.
But like I mean his versatility is what one of the things that like amuses me. Like I mean just another random one, like I remember Zach Galifianakis's like Comedy Central presents stuff, and then like a few years later he blows up in The Hangover, and I was like, that's really cool because I remember you singing about being fat Jesus, and that was fun. I was there with that. I'm sure you've been doing comedy for like 20 years, but I was there before The Hangover, so I'm at least with you there, buddy.
Yeah, it's some different too than like Louis. Like I don't even know, but like he's probably like he's getting up close to 50. And he's been doing stand up since he was 20, but it's like that thing where like Louis blows up and everyone's like, oh, like overnight success, and you're like, oh, he's been doing this for like 20 years.
Yeah. It's overnight success if you completely disregard the 20 years of work that went into that overnight success.
Yeah. And so I was trying to think of more people because like the problem, like I've watched so much stand up and it's just like so many names and like people, but like Donald Glover's stand up is also really good too.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why like I was a huge fan of him just through like stand up, and then that's when he started when he like became childish.
Yeah.
And kind of like what we were saying too, and like when I saw him when he came to Arizona once, and like there was like 20 people there.
Yeah.
And like
we were at this concert together, I think, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And there was like 20, 30 people there, and then it was like just him. And then it was like us, and it was a good show. And then now I hear about like this concert. He does it like the Cosmopolitan in Vegas, where it was on like the second to last floor, and people were like jumping up and down so much that they had to tell them to stop because they were going to cave the floor in. And I'm just like, and I'm like, all right. And I'm like, I really want to see him at one of those shows because like my memory of it is still awesome, but it was like 30 people just kind of like listening to his music.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I was I had forgotten that we had that like weird, because that was years before we met.
Yeah.
But yeah, very cool. Anybody else, or do you want to dive into some Trove topics? It's getting late there, so I don't want to keep you up too much later because you have work tomorrow and it's already 2 a.m. in your time.
And there's tons of other people, but I mean we can pretty much cut it there. Like there's not too much we're gonna like break ground on if I tell you like Anthony Jeselnik's pretty funny.
Yeah.
Like yeah.
Did you ever Garfunkel and Oates?
Oh yeah, I know them.
Yeah, I enjoy them. I enjoy the ones that do like clever things with the music. As a former musician, I think that's like one of my little like I always wanted to write like musical comedy kind of things, and I did like that's another one of my little stand-up bits. I spent like 5 minutes just setting up a guitar and an amp and stuff, and then I played like one note, and then like I tore it all down and was like, thank you. And it was like a very Andy Kaufman-esque kind of like bit that I did. Yay college, where people were drunk and laughed anyway.
See, the one I wanted to do that was like that is I wanted to bring a newspaper with me, like today's newspaper, and I wanted to be like, all right, like if I haven't prepared and I need to see the headlines to like try to make a joke out of, and I'm basically like reading the newspaper and I'm like, and I'm like, no, and I like turn the page, and it's just that for like 5 minutes.
Nice.
And I'm just like, and I'm like, that's like too out there and like insane to like for people to think it's funny.
Did you see this? Did you see this? This thing Trump said. I mean, he said that. Yeah, he said this thing. Crazy, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And then, yeah, it's that kind of anti-humor character that like Kyle Mooney does it a lot on SNL now. Like one of his like regular Weekend Update characters is like, have you heard about this? Have you heard about this thing? And it's like he's just painfully unfunny, and the awkwardness and the painfully unfunniness is like is the joke. And I'm like, there are people that can pull that off, and then there are other people where I'm like, nope, you're not one of those people, so just stop it. Well, cool, great chatting comedy with you. I appreciate that we have like very similar tastes in a lot of our comedy interests there.
It's like we get along and are friends or something.
That was weird, crazy. All right, so